Nobody expected it, not the studio, not the viewers, and definitely not Robert De Niro. One moment he was laughing, loud and arrogant. Seconds later he was stunned into silence by a single line from Karoline Leavitt that tore his argument apart on national television. This was not just a disagreement, it was a brutal collision of two worlds, live and unfiltered. The clash was so raw, so unexpected, it had the entire internet spinning. And just when you think it cannot get any worse for De Niro, it does. What Karoline said next, it flipped the entire interview upside down. You must see what happens next, because this is not just a takedown, it is a moment that exposes something far bigger, something no one was ready to confront. And if you blink, you will miss the very second the power shifts. This is where everything changes. Karoline Leavitt had barely leaned into the microphone when the storm began to brew. Sitting across from her was none other than Robert De Niro, Hollywood royalty, outspoken, relentless, and infamous for using every media opportunity to blast his political beliefs like fireworks on live TV. For years, De Niro has thrived on confrontation. He is the kind of guest who dominates a studio with sheer volume, legacy, and celebrity swagger. But on this particular day, something felt different. The atmosphere was charged, not just with opinions but with something electric and unpredictable, like two trains speeding toward each other with no brakes. On one side, Karoline Leavitt, young, sharp, unshakably calm, and unapologetically conservative. On the other, Robert De Niro, fiery, seasoned, armed with decades of media warfare. The collision was not just expected, it was destined. They were not just clashing over talking points. This was a war of worlds. De Niro represents the loud, emotional side of Hollywood liberalism, a man who has made entire headlines from profanity-laced, anti-Trump speeches. Meanwhile, Karoline stands for a rising generation of conservatives, media-savvy, confident, and fluent in turning attacks into ammunition. It was not just a political debate. It was generational, cultural, deeply personal. And what nobody in that studio realized, not even the host, was that this exchange would soon escape the confines of television and explode across every corner of the internet. But before it went viral, before the headlines, before the millions of reposts and debates, there was a single moment, one line, one shift in power that no one saw coming. This is where the real story begins, because something happens in this interview that you will not find in other viral moments. It is not just that Karoline holds her ground. She flips the script in a way that silences the room. What did she say? Why did it hit so hard? And what made Robert De Niro, the man who never backs down, completely lose his cool in front of millions? You are about to find out, but not all at once, because to understand the weight of what happened, you need to see what was at stake. Karoline was not just defending a viewpoint, she was walking into a trap. The segment was clearly designed to put her on the defensive, to bait her into reacting emotionally while De Niro delivered his usual outrage-fueled monologue. It could have worked. It should have worked. But what actually happened flipped the power dynamic completely, and, in doing so, exposed something far deeper than anyone expected. You will see applause. You will hear gasps. And by the end, you will understand why this was not just a media moment, it was a cultural detonation. There is a reason this clip did not just go viral. It went viral with consequences. Careers were affected. Narratives were shattered. And trust me, if you think you know how it ends, you are wrong. This is why watching until the final second is not optional. It is essential, because the real twist is still coming. And when it does, everything you thought you knew about this clash will change. To fully grasp the intensity of what transpired between Karoline Leavitt and Robert De Niro on that live broadcast, we need to understand the climate they were both walking into. The political and cultural battleground was charged. On one side, you had a rising wave of conservative voices, young, driven, and unapologetically taking on the mainstream narrative. Karoline Leavitt represents this new force. A former communications director, a staunch defender of conservative ideals, and a sharp political strategist, Leavitt has carved a niche for herself in the volatile world of media. With a reputation for biting commentary, She doesn't shy away from controversy, especially when it's her beliefs being challenged. But her rise hasn't come without its costs. She's been labeled a political provocateur by some, a disruptor by others. Yet through all the name-calling and media scrutiny, she's only sharpened her focus. And when you see her facing off against someone like Robert De Niro, you realize that her confidence isn't just born from experience. It's born from the knowledge that she knows exactly how the media game is played. And then there's Robert De Niro, the Hollywood icon with decades of fame, glory, and undeniable influence. For years, De Niro has been one of the most vocal critics of American conservatism, using his star power to amplify his opinions, especially when it comes to politics. His infamous anti-Trump rants, where he spared no punches, became as much a part of his legacy as his Oscar-winning performances. For De Niro, the line between actor and activist has always been blurry, and on many occasions his celebrity status was wielded as a weapon to further his political views. He thrives in this environment. The louder the confrontation, the more fuel for his fire. And for all his skill in navigating the world of Hollywood glamour, there is no denying the tension his political views have often created, especially among those who don't share his ideology. But when it comes to high-profile debates, De Niro has long been seen as a bulldozer, unstoppable and relentless. Now let's talk about the moment that made this exchange so explosive. At the heart of this televised clash was the media's persistent demonization of conservative viewpoints. The left-leaning network where this interview took place has been known for bringing in prominent conservatives, mostly as sparring partners. The idea is simple. Invite someone who doesn't share your views, let them speak their piece but control the narrative. The goal isn't just to debate, it's to win. In a way, the interview was set up with all the classic cues. De Niro, with his firebrand tactics, was primed to have a righteous outburst, and Karoline, with her young, calm demeanor, was expected to be the underdog. It was a clash of ideologies, yes, but also a clash of media strategies. Both were being thrown into a ring that felt like a no-win situation, unless, of course, one of them managed to break the pattern and flip the entire narrative on its head. But in this situation, the stakes weren't just political. There was a cultural war brewing beneath the surface, one that the mainstream media refused to acknowledge but everyone felt. De Niro had been part of the cultural elite for decades, and his influence on the narrative was undeniable. Meanwhile, Karoline's rise symbolizes a wave of change, where the voices once dismissed as fringe are now demanding a seat at the table. Her appearance was about more than politics. It was about challenging the status quo, showing that the left couldn't control the narrative forever. As the interview began, the tension in the room was palpable. There were hints that Karoline was more than ready for whatever De Niro might throw at her. The setup was classic. De Niro would likely lash out at her, questioning her views, calling her naive, dismissing her as a mere spokesperson for a controversial movement. But the real story, the twist, was still to come. And the camera was rolling, catching every moment. But as the words started to fly, one thing became clear. This wasn't going to be just another political confrontation. This was going to be different. How different? Well, let's just say this. Exchange would become one of the most talked about moments of the year. The live broadcast was underway, and the tension in the studio was electric. Karoline Leavitt sat across from Robert De Niro, the seasoned Hollywood veteran, who was all too aware of the role he had to play in this political theater. The producers had worked hard to set the stage. Camera angles, lighting, the subtle cues. Everything was designed for maximum impact. De Niro was known for his fiery speeches, but what no one anticipated was the young conservative's calm demeanor and razor-sharp focus. As the debate began, De Niro launched the first salvo. "Let's be honest," he started, his voice dripping with disdain. "Your party has no real vision. It's all just sound bites and empty promises." His eyes never left Karoline, sizing her up like a lion about to strike. He was playing the classic role of the political heavyweight, the champion of reason in a sea of chaos. He had been here before, on countless stages, and had mastered the art of the sarcastic jab, the condescending remark, the dismissive grin. Karoline, however, wasn't fazed. She sat with a quiet confidence, leaning forward just enough to show she wasn't intimidated. "It's easy to throw stones from your Hollywood mansion, Robert," she countered, her tone calm yet sharp. "But maybe it's time you stop lecturing the rest of America on what they should believe." The audience was dead silent for a split second, the tension building in the room. This wasn't a typical political back and forth. This was a collision of ideologies, and everyone in the studio could feel it. De Niro's lips twisted into a slight smile, a knowing look of superiority in his eyes. "And what's your big plan, Karoline? What's your vision for America? More division, more fake news." His voice had the familiar edge, a tone that could easily crumble anyone who wasn't prepared for it, but Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she locked eyes with him, and her response was measured yet cutting. "No, Robert, what we need is a return to real values, a focus on what's best for the American people, not political elites with their own agenda. You think your liberal agenda works for everyone, but all it does is divide us further." The audience, which had been watching with bated breath, now seemed divided. Some applauded her response, while others were visibly uncomfortable. De Niro was a Hollywood icon, a figure who had won the hearts of millions. But Karoline's words cut through the studio like a laser. She was young, sure, but she wasn't naive, and in that moment, she was playing the game better than De Niro had expected. He leaned back, his gaze hardening. "Let's not pretend. You speak for the American people, Karoline. You're just another puppet, another mouthpiece for the far-right agenda. You don't understand what it's like to be in the real world." His words were sharp, his delivery quick. He was throwing a punch, trying to get under her skin to make her flinch. But again, she didn't give him the satisfaction. She sat up straighter, her voice calm but full of conviction. "And you don't understand what it's like to be someone who has to fight for their voice to be heard. Maybe you're so used to being applauded that you forget what it's like to represent people who don't have a microphone." The studio fell into a heavy silence. De Niro's face flickered with irritation. The crowd had shifted. The applause for Karoline's words wasn't the kind of applause De Niro was used to. His fans were loyal, but they were silent now, unsure of how to react. This wasn't the political battle they expected. De Niro, however, wasn't one to back down. "So now you're the voice of the forgotten? Please, you're just a puppet in a game you don't fully understand. You're being used, just like everyone else who follows that party of yours." Karoline's response was almost chilling in its calmness. "Funny how you talk about being used when you've built your career on being used by Hollywood elites, right? You think you're better than everyone else because you've been paid to play pretend. You don't represent the working people. You represent the few who want to control the narrative. But guess what? The narrative's changing." The shift in the room was palpable. What started as a clash of personalities had now become a battle of ideologies. The audience could feel the momentum shift in Karoline's favor. De Niro, despite his powerful position in Hollywood, was being outmaneuvered by a younger, less experienced player. It wasn't just her words that struck a nerve. It was the fact that Karoline had hit him where it hurt most. His reliance on a controlled, liberal narrative that was slowly losing its grip. De Niro's face flushed with anger. "You think you know it all, huh? Let's see how far your little right-wing rhetoric takes you. You're just another echo of the same tired arguments. Nothing new, nothing groundbreaking." Karoline smiled, a small but powerful gesture. "Actually, Robert, I'm not the one recycling the same old lines. I'm the one bringing new ideas to the table. But don't worry, you'll catch up eventually, if you're willing to listen." And that's when it happened. A ripple of laughter broke out in the audience. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't even scornful. It was genuine amusement at the realization that Karoline had not only held her own, but had, in fact, flipped the narrative. In that moment, Robert De Niro, who had so often been the one to cast judgment, to speak over others, was left speechless. The live broadcast was now in overdrive. Viewers at home were glued to their screens. Social media was ablaze with reactions, some in favor of Karoline, others still rooting for De Niro, but the consensus was clear. This wasn't just another political argument. This was something bigger. The clash of these two, representing two vastly different worlds, had ignited a firestorm, and it was only going to get hotter from here. As the debate continued, it was clear that the dynamic had shifted. What had started as an attempt to dismiss Karoline Leavitt as a rookie had turned into a defining moment. In a world where media narratives are crafted and shaped by the powerful, Karoline had just broken free of the mold. She had survived a battle against one of Hollywood's finest, and not only had she held her ground, she had completely flipped the script. The audience watched, spellbound, as the back and forth continued. This was no longer about politics. This was about who would control the narrative. And in that moment, the momentum was with Karoline. The confrontation between Karoline Leavitt and Robert De Niro had been simmering for what felt like an eternity, but it was now about to reach its boiling point. Karoline had held her ground, her calm and collected responses relentlessly chipping away at De Niro's once immovable confidence. De Niro, who had dominated the stage in the past, was now visibly rattled. The public, once loyal to him, had begun to question whether he truly understood the common man, or if he was simply playing a part in a well-rehearsed Hollywood script. The moment arrived with surgical precision. Karoline, after letting De Niro's last jab hang in the air, leaned in slightly, her voice calm but cutting. "You're right about one thing, Robert. You don't get it. You don't get what it's like to be an ordinary American fighting for a chance. But I understand something you'll never comprehend. Real power isn't in your Hollywood fame or your political influence. It's in the truth that you've spent your life hiding from, and the truth is people are tired of being lied to. They're tired of the same old establishment game." The silence in the room was suffocating. The audience, once uncertain, now felt the gravity of her words. In that one moment, Karoline had shifted the power dynamic completely. The tables had turned. The room was no longer just watching a debate. They were witnessing a generational clash that could define the future of political discourse. For a split second, Robert De Niro stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, as if he hadn't prepared for such a direct hit. His eyes darted across the room, searching for something, anything to regain control, but it was too late. The weight of Karoline's words had struck deep, and the control he once had slipped through, his fingers like sand. Then it happened. The live broadcast had captured everything. The world watching saw the shift, the stunned look on De Niro's face, the way he suddenly seemed smaller, less authoritative. Karoline, calm and collected, had done the impossible. She'd not only held her own, but she had dismantled the very foundation of De Niro's argument. And it was in that moment that the viral energy was unleashed. Within minutes, social media was ablaze. Clips of the exchange flooded Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Headlines screamed across news sites. Karoline Leavitt destroys Robert De Niro, an explosive live TV moment. Hashtags trended within seconds, with millions of viewers sharing the pivotal moment over and over again. The power of that single statement, Karoline's piercing analysis of De Niro's disconnect from reality, was too raw, too real to ignore. People weren't just talking about the debate anymore. They were talking about the shift in the narrative. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. Karoline had gone from being just another young politician to a force to be reckoned with. De Niro's response, or lack thereof, was shared as an example of what happens when someone challenges the status quo. The viral moment wasn't just about who won the debate. It was about the power of truth, the ability to cut through the noise, and the force of conviction that had changed the conversation entirely. As the broadcast concluded, the camera panned over Karoline's face, a slight smile playing on her lips. She had said what needed to be said. She had delivered a moment that was destined to be remembered, not for the politics but for the sheer unrelenting power of one young woman's words against a Hollywood titan. The energy in the room, and across the globe, was undeniable. This wasn't just a debate. This was a turning point. The aftermath of the explosive live TV clash between Karoline Leavitt and Robert De Niro was profound, reshaping not only their public personas but also the political landscape in unexpected ways. Karoline, once seen as a rising star within conservative circles, had managed to redefine herself in front of a global audience. The confidence, the precision in her arguments, and the unflinching way she held her ground against a Hollywood icon elevated her status. It wasn't just about winning the argument. It was about showing the world that she had the presence and intellect to challenge even the most powerful figures. In contrast, Robert De Niro, who had been revered for his outspokenness and political activism, found himself scrambling to maintain his relevance. His flustered reaction and inability to effectively respond to Karoline's piercing comments made him appear out of touch, an aging celebrity more concerned with self-preservation than engaging in meaningful discourse. The fallout was swift. Where he had once been celebrated as a truth-teller, he was now being viewed by many as a symbol of elitism and the old guard, out of step with the very people he claimed to represent. The shift in public perception was immediate. Karoline's ability to dominate the conversation on her terms, to expose the disconnect between De Niro's lofty ideals and the realities of everyday Americans, cemented her as a political force. She had captured the attention of a broader audience far beyond her conservative base. Young people, disillusioned by the political establishment, saw in her a reflection of their frustration, a reminder that truth and authenticity still mattered in politics. Her quick rise wasn't just about her skill in debate, it was about the moment she created that resonated with millions. As for De Niro, while his fan base remained loyal, his credibility took a significant hit. This wasn't just a typical public feud, it was a confrontation that exposed the limits of his influence. The narrative of an untouchable Hollywood elite had begun to crack, and his failure to effectively counter Karoline's argument left many questioning his motives and the authenticity of his political engagement. The once lauded actor was now reduced to a punchline in a political discourse dominated by real-world issues, leaving him in a vulnerable position. Looking at the broader picture, this confrontation wasn't just an isolated moment of drama. It was a stark reminder of the growing divide between elite figures and the average public. The rise of figures like Karoline, who were willing to challenge the status quo, signaled a shift in the cultural conversation. In future debates, both political and social, Karoline's fearless response would be referenced as a pivotal turning point. The moment she silenced a Hollywood titan with nothing but truth would be remembered as one of those rare instances when the narrative was reshaped in real time, when one person's conviction changed everything. This encounter would live on in pop culture as an iconic representation of the power of authenticity over celebrity, truth over image, and real connection over political performance. It was more than just a moment in time, it was a statement. As the dust settles from the explosive live TV showdown between Karoline Leavitt and Robert De Niro, one thing is crystal clear. The landscape of public discourse has irrevocably changed. What we witnessed was not just a debate, it was a clash of ideologies, a moment when the political establishment faced off against the people it often overlooks. Karoline, with her unwavering confidence and razor-sharp logic, managed to carve out a space for herself that's both powerful and undeniable. Her calm, calculated destruction of Robert De Niro on live television wasn't just a victory for her, it was a victory for every person who feels silenced by the elites, every individual who believes that true power comes from holding the line and telling the truth. For Robert De Niro, this confrontation marked a significant turning point. A seasoned actor known for his bold statements and political activism, De Niro's stammering response to Karoline's sharp points revealed a man unable to keep up with the changing tides of the conversation. His inability to engage effectively with her to provide a compelling rebuttal left his audience questioning his relevance not just in politics but in culture at large. What was once a carefully crafted image of the outspoken Hollywood star who stood at the front of social causes now seemed like a facade exposed under the harsh light of reality. This was a rare moment where everything aligned. The stakes were high, the characters well-defined, and the conflict had the kind of resolution that doesn't just fade into the background. Karoline Leavitt's fearless response was more than just a viral moment. It was a moment of real consequence. It was about confronting the power structures, challenging the status quo, and ensuring that the voices of those who feel disenfranchised aren't drowned out by the wealthy elites. And that's what makes this story so important, not just for Karoline but for everyone watching. This wasn't a small moment in a large political conversation. This was a shift in the narrative. So what happens now? Will this be a fleeting, viral moment, or will it ignite a larger conversation about authenticity, power, and the real divide between Hollywood elites and the everyday citizen? What does Karoline's success mean for the future of political discourse in America? This clash isn't just something that can be brushed aside. It's a reflection of the broader battle for the soul of the nation. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think this moment means for the future of political debate? Do you believe Karoline Leavitt's approach is the new wave of political discourse, or was this a one-off? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I can't wait to hear your take.